You know that feeling when you're so busy trying to take the absolute perfect photo of a sunset that you completely forget to actually look at it? Yeah, if you've ever been there, you are definitely in the right place. Welcome to this explainer of The Unfinished Butterfly by Max and Claude. Today we're diving into a deeply metafictional novel that draws its inspiration directly from Vladimir Nabokov's real-life, unfinished final work, the original of Laura. It's an incredible story that just totally blurs the lines between our identity, the act of creation, and the heavy, heavy cost of trying to preserve a moment. Okay, let's dive into this. Consider this really striking philosophical thought pulled straight from the index cards of our main guy, Philip Wilde. So Philip is a novelist, but he's also a butterfly collector, a lepidopterist. And he observes that a butterfly's beauty exists purely because it's completely unself-conscious, right? The exact moment we recognize it, name it, and try to capture it, well, we're essentially pinning it down. We end its living freedom just to turn it into an object of study. And honestly, this idea just sets the perfect atmospheric tone for everything we're going to unpack today.
And that leads us right into the core thematic tension of this entire explainer. This is a genuinely haunting question posed by Philip's wife, Audrey, when she's looking at his massive butterfly collection. See, Philip argues that his pin specimens aren't dead, they're preserved. But Audrey challenges this. She's asking us to really think about it. When we obsessively preserve a moment, a memory, or even a person in our art, do we actually kill the very thing that made them alive in the first place?
To really understand Philip's mind, we have to look at his twin metaphors for memory and writing. It's like a tug of war. On one side, we have the net. The net represents the exciting swoop, the thrill of capturing the living, breathing moment. It's exhilarating. But the butterfly doesn't stay in the net. It goes into the killing jar. The jar represents memory. It represents the past. Philip realizes that writing about a moment is literally like putting it in that jar. It forces the living, breathing present into the permanent stillness of the past. It preserves the moment, sure, but it kills it in the process.
Part 1. The writer's erasure. This brings us to the first of our three main subjects, Philip Wilde himself. Now, Philip shares a very specific habit with the real-life Vladimir Nabokov. He drafts absolutely everything on small index cards. But he gets so tired of constantly turning life into still memories that he checks into the Metamorphosis Center, which is this Swiss clinic with actually, bizarre is probably an understatement, a completely unprecedented goal. He calls it titration. Working under a neurologist named Dr. Hubert Lescaut, Philip uses intense, sustained meditation to voluntarily remove his own body parts from his consciousness in controlled doses. He literally wants to delete his physical map to discover what he calls his pre-narrative self. The original version of Philip that existed way before language and stories ever started defining him.
Let's trace how he actually pulls this off. He starts at the extremities, furthest from the brain. First, he successfully meditates away the presence of his foot. It just becomes this optional rumor in his mind. Crazy, right? Then he successfully moves up to the ankle. But step 3 is where he hits a massive roadblock. He gets stuck at the knee. Why? Because he realizes that a knee is a hinge. You literally cannot delete a joint because its entire existence is relational. It only exists to connect the thigh to the shin. This realization leads to a massive breakthrough for Philip. He realizes the body isn't just a map you can simply delete piece by piece. The body is an ongoing, continuous conversation. You can't just isolate and silence one part without affecting the whole shebang. So his whole project of subtraction suddenly morphs into a project of translation. Instead of erasing his physical form, he realizes he has to loosen his mind's tight grip on it. He has to change how the parts speak to each other and just listen to that beautiful, continuing argument.
Part 2. Flora, the clear glass. Now, what's really interesting here is how we shift from the man erasing himself to the woman he spent his entire life over-describing. This is Flora Lassiter. She's Philip's muse, notoriously known as the most described woman in Europe. Now, her existence might sound glamorous, but it's actually agonizing. She's been renamed by 3 different husbands and lovers. She's been described in 4 of Philip's novels, made the subject of an award-winning documentary, and get this, she was even sculpted entirely in butter. Everyone has turned her into text. She's just a collection of other people's perceptions. And this absolutely peaks in Philip's 4th novel, The Subtraction, where he literally kills her fictional counterpart off by slowly fading her adjectives away until she becomes pure empty white space on the page. For 8 whole months, Flora completely refuses to read this novel. She is terrified that Philip's ultimate conclusion was that she amounted to absolutely nothing.
But finally, sitting at a cafe in Geneva, she bravely opens the book, and she turns to page 187. This is the exact turning point. On this page, Flora discovers that Philip didn't erase her out of cruelty at all. He actually gave her a profound, life-changing gift.
This is what she reads. She realizes she was never the view that all these artists were obsessively trying to capture. She had been, all along, the glass. Clear, structural, necessary. Being heavily described by all these men didn't erase her original self. It proved she was the vital, surviving window that let their views through in the first place. Philip had to write her to see her, sure, but she herself remained totally intact, surviving the heavy weight of all those endless descriptions.
Part 3. Audrey, the editor's structure. Now we meet Audrey. She is Philip's wife of 19 years. If Flora is the muse, Audrey is the raw material. She is a brilliant former documentary film editor who has basically spent decades maintaining the structure of Philip's life, quietly letting their marriage fuel his artistic metabolism. But while Philip is off in the clinic, Audrey returns to her roots and takes on an editing job. She's handed this disastrous 4-hour rough cut of a documentary about Pierre, a sculptor in Marseille. And the footage is chaotic because it actively avoids one very dark truth. Pierre's hands are trembling. He is dying of a degenerative condition. Audrey brilliantly recuts the entire film, stripping away all the noise to focus on a single 12-minute shot of Pierre just looking at his work. She stops avoiding the truth. The crucial point is captured so beautifully in her realization. The film's true structure is the death. Audrey realizes that you have to let the ending be central. Everything else finds its place around it. And, this editing triumph perfectly mirrors her own life with Philip. She discovers that confronting inevitable endings, whether it's a film, a chapter of your life, or even a 19-year marriage, is literally the only way to find the true structure of our stories.
Part 4. Finding the original. With Philip erasing himself, Flora reclaiming her identity, and Audrey finding her structure, we finally arrive at the ultimate question of the source material. What does it really mean to be an original? To answer that, we have to return to the number 138. The real Vladimir Nabokov died leaving behind exactly 138 index cards for his unfinished masterpiece. In our story, Philip Wilde also writes his thoughts on these small, finite index cards. He does this to intentionally limit his sprawl. Think about it. A small card forces the writer to be concise, to justify every single word. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate difference between art and reality. Throughout his whole life, Philip's novels, his sentences, and yes, his pinned butterflies, they were merely copies. They were just translations of the world. The original is the living, moving, untranslated reality that exists right now before language swoops in with a net to capture it. Look at how wonderfully this all resolves for our characters. In Milan, Flora happily embraces her role as the language translator, thriving right there in the gap between words. Audrey completely steps into her power as the shaper of raw material, owning her role as the editor. And Philip? He finally does the unthinkable. He sits in a room with Flora, looks at a beautiful pinned butterfly on his wall, and he puts down his pen. He decides to just be in the unwritten moment, without needing to instantly turn it into a story. I want you to take a moment to really reflect on this. What is left when the relentless human need to narrate, to describe, and to post about our lives finally falls away? When the story stops, what is actually there in the quiet? What is left is reality. As Philip realizes, the original is always moving. The true, beautiful essence of a person or a moment can never be fully captured in a net, in a killing jar, or on the pages of a novel. Never. Because the moment you capture it, it's no longer the original. The original is alive, and to be alive means to always be in motion. Which brings us to Philip's final triumphant act. He writes out his 247th index card, leaves it on the kitchen table for Audrey, and states that the next thing he does will not be a card. Audrey turns it over. The back of that final index card is completely blank. Philip echoes Nabokov's real-life unfinished work, proving that stopping wasn't a failure at all. Laying down the pen and turning to actually look at the world is the most honest, perfect completion possible. I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought to take away from this explainer. When an artist, or honestly, when we in our own everyday lives, stop trying to document absolutely everything, is that a failure to finish the story? Or is that blank page our ultimate arrival at the truth? Sometimes the most beautiful thing we can possibly do is leave the card blank and simply live in the untranslated gap between art and reality.